Hello, hello. Welcome to today's stream. Where is my music playing from? What the hell? Why is the music playing? Hello, what's up, everyone? This is a very interesting stream. We're taking a break from the Murat Park draw to talk about this. But before that, where the hell is this audio coming from? Oh, I understood. There we go. Okay, I had my YouTube open in a separate tab. Sorry about that. So, folks, today very interesting stream. I need to get into Chashme mode for this. Okay. And a fair bit of warning to all of you who are going to jump in. The contents of today's stream might change a lot of things for you, right? It might change how you see the world that we live in today. It might change, hopefully, it changes your understanding of the world, right? Hopefully, today we're able to build upon your understanding of the world, reach a shared understanding of the future that we're headed towards. Um, but the way we're going to do all this is by talking about someone who's very special to us on this channel, Balaji Srinivasan. Now, of course, this is not, we haven't gotten Balaji on video yet, right? We will do a separate episode where we talk to Balaji, go deeper into some of these ideas. But before we get there, we have a lot of work to do, right? We need to understand what is happening. Okay. So this is also day 3 of Murat Park's drop. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about what's happening there. I actually haven't checked what's happened because I just wrapped up a UI UX design class with the 10K designers cohort just five or 10 minutes ago. But let's get started. Shubhank, you are the first commenter. Welcome. Namaste. Hello, Gaurav. Hello, Murli. What's up, Vishwa? What's up, Shubham? Murli, glad to know this, bro. That's exactly what we're aiming for. What's up, Agrim? What's up, Viren? One thing I will also say is, folks, we're at 1.4K subscribers, almost exactly. I checked right now, just before the stream, and it was 1400. Um, I also found out that 52% of you watching aren't subscribed. And I was like, yo, that's so crazy, right? So please, if your subscribe button on YouTube is still red, please do that, right? Please subscribe. That just means that you're telling YouTube explicitly, I am interested. I am interested. Show me more of these, right? So please do that. And of course, if you want a notification, YouTube also has the bell feature so that you don't miss a stream. What's up, Agrim? What's up, Ninad? Mobius and Rahul. Abhinav. What's up, भड़का हुआ विद्यार्थी? सादर नमस्कार आपको भी. Today we're going to be talking about not too much about Murat Park. If you're interested in Murat Park, check out the previous 2 episodes if you haven't already. We will do a breakdown analysis where we talk about the whole event, 3 days, zoom out, how did it go, what exactly happened. But that's not going to be today. Today we're going to be talking about how to start a new country, right? Oops. Oopsies, I'm showing you my entire screen. Let me switch to Chrome. I don't know what's happening. Why is my stream so haphazard today? Why are things not working as they should be? Probably an indicator of what's to come. Okay, and by that I mean today is a very intense stream. It's a very intense stream. What we're going to be talking about today is not just about, hey, money is changing because of crypto. We're not going to just talk about, hey, art is changing because of crypto. We're going to be talking about the world changing because of crypto, right? So here we go. Let's jump into this. This is what our main topic of discussion today is going to be. For those of you who are not familiar with Balaji Srinivasan or 1729, 1729 is the Ramanujan number right? That's the significance of 1729. You want to know more about that? Check it out. 1729 is Balaji Srinivasan's website. Um, in this, he talks about a bunch of stuff, but mainly you can get paid in Bitcoin to do tasks. There's something else that we are doing where you also get paid Bitcoin to do tasks, but 1729 is one of them, right? It's a newsletter that gives you tasks that you can do. Today, we're going to be reviewing one of these articles they've written, which is how to start a new country. I want to really quickly know in the chat, how many of you have thought about this before? Have you ever thought about the fact that we can change how things are currently? Let me know quickly in the chat. I want to get some early impressions to give me some idea of how deep I should go today. Because we're going to be comprehensively covering this. I'm going to be connecting some nodes for you. I'm going to be connecting some insights, right? Starting with this image actually. But tell me, what do you think? Ramanujan, genuine bro, 100%. The idea is amazing, okay? The concept basically is that there are Ramanujans in the world that exist today who are undiscovered. In the same way that Ramanujan could have had way more contributions to the world if only his talent was maybe found a little earlier, or a lot of other factors. The world we would be living in it would be totally different, right? Usually, it is individuals that end up changing the course of the world, right? It's not companies, it's individuals, and of course they might be at companies. So the idea with 1729 is, how do we find these individuals that exist all over the world, today's Ramanujans, and how do we bring them visibility? However, today's session, we're going to be talking about how do we start a new country. Not gonna lie, folks, you know what the vibe I get from this is? It's a very tutorial type of vibe, right? Which is what I love. I love that tutorial vibe because, bro, who doesn't want a tutorial? Start a new country. So where we'll start off is, this image that you see here was done by Jack Butcher. This is actually an NFT that he did. It's on his foundation. Let me quickly show you. Can somebody guess how much this sold for? Can you tell me quickly while I look this up? I don't remember exactly. But Nations to Nodes, beautiful NFT. It's actually animated. Sold for 5x. That is the NFT. That is the NFT. Right? So this was made by Jack Butcher, visualized value for Balaji's article is what I'm guessing. That's where this concept of nations to nodes comes from. But in general, this is not a new concept to you if you've watched our Genesis stream, right? Today is the 14th day in a row that we're streaming. But in the first one, we actually talked about a lot of things that are covered in this article. And I think it was before 9th April. We did that stream on 1st April and we talked about a lot of this stuff. The idea in general is that as we spend more time online, we're going to reinvent certain systems that, when those systems were created for the physical world. But a lot of them today are obsolete when it comes to the real world. One simple example of that is, let's start with a simple one, right? Let's start with art. In the real world, you could only make money from art, right? As a collector. Let's talk about specific. You could only make money as a collector in the real world before NFTs if you were super rich. Because what you would do is you would buy a painting from, or an art piece from an artist for $1 million, work that up, you now own this asset and you sell it, let's say, for 10 million. So what would typically happen is the artist would not typically get a percentage of that. So if an artist is selling for 1 million today and 10 years later it sells for 100 million, the artist typically wouldn't see that benefit. That benefit would go to the owners who sold, as well as maybe the curator who's involved. With NFTs, however, since we're living most of our life online, we've realized that digital art might be more valuable than we thought, right? And of course, this is not an NFT stream, so we won't go any deeper into that. But we've basically reinvented what it means to be a collector online. An art collector, we've reinvented what it means to be an artist online. Similarly, we've reinvented the concept of money. Today, if you had a company with 100 people, and these 100 people are in India, you would register your company with India, and you would have payroll which distributes the salary at the end of every month, and ICICI or whoever your bank is will help you do this. What if these 100 people were in 100 different countries, right? The system that we have today wasn't built for that, because previously it was impossible, right? So that wasn't a part of the system. Today, if you had to do that, it would be nearly impossible. Why? Because, dude, have you ever tried sending an international bank transfer? It's super, super difficult, especially in India. Maybe it's easier in some parts of the world. I've heard Singapore is better that way. But it's really hard making an international transfer. And imagine doing that for 100. This thing, it would not be economically feasible. Like, you would just not do it. You would be like, let's hire locally. What Balaji is trying to say with this article is that these kind of things, it's a bigger picture that's playing out, right? And eventually what happens is these communities that are built online, they have a shared culture, they have some shared values, they have some version of an economy between them where they're earning money, making friends, finding partners, finding collaborators. And once you do that, some of these communities will eventually stay in the cloud, so that this becomes a new country in the cloud, or a lot of them will buy land and set up their own cities, their own towns, and eventually their own countries. Today, most ambitious people, the highest impact thing they can do is start a startup. We're reaching a point where being an artist is going to be at the same level as being a startup founder, right? NFTs will do that. However, more in the future, as we play this out, what happens is people will just start new countries, bro. So we're going to be talking about this. A quick chat check, if everybody is with me. Okay. Prakhar ke Pravachan, welcome to the chat, Prakhar. A very serious topic today. We're going to be talking about how do we start a new country. Okay. So hopefully, Prakhar, you get some ideas for the eventual country that you start later. Here's the deal, okay? Overall, we'll be talking about each of these parts today. Hopefully, we have time to go through all of this. But think about this, right? I don't want to just read this out, so I'm going to give you my own interpretation. You can read this later. Countries typically, the reason countries were so before countries, what did you have? You had kingdoms, right? India, for example, was a nation where you had a ton of kingdoms. Some of them were sovereign. Some of them, it was always moving. The boundaries of nations, of these kingdoms, were always moving, and it wasn't as clearly defined, right? Typically, back then, the way you grow your empire would be to either collaborate. So you somehow, your daughter or son gets married to that king, and now your kingdoms are joined, or you would wage war on them, or you would do something else, right? There were very few ways you could collaborate, and war was one of the things, right? Before countries, we had kingdoms. However, kingdoms led to countries. That's an important thing to note, right? So the design of countries today comes from a world where kingdoms existed before. It doesn't come from a world where this is how it's going to be in the future. It's a today's system. Today's systems are usually a reflection of the past. There's some representation of the present, but not a representation of the future. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is typically the reason countries existed in the past, right? Actually, let's go with the flow of this article. Okay. I don't want to go all over the place. This is what the goal is, right? We want to start a new country for the same reason that we want. Okay, it's basically a fresh start. When you look at startups, the reason they're born is because the status quo sucks, right? Imagine making an online payment. Let's take an Indian example. Online payment before Razorpay was difficult as shit. There was no UPI, right? Razorpay really made things very simple, and UPI, of course, made it even more simpler, right? So startups are born when problems exist. There's a financial incentive to solve the problem. The reason new countries will exist in the future is because there are problems with current countries, okay? And there are financial incentives. So This is exactly what we just spoke about, right? There's a financial incentive in the tech sector to form new companies, right? Make online payments simple, Razorpay, Stripe. Make ordering taxis a simple process, Uber, Lyft, Ola, all over the world, right? Every country has either Uber or some version of their own local taxi thing. You have Kareem in Dubai, for example. Um, Food, you have Swiggy today, right? It's not that food ordering didn't exist before Swiggy. Swiggy just said, we're going to aggregate it, we're going to make it so much better. So take that same thinking and imagine recreating something that affects your environment so much, which is your physical surroundings, the city you're in, the house that you live in, the country that you live in. How exactly would that work, right? We're going to talk about that now, right? One thing I will say about this article is this is the article you can read multiple times. You can read this multiple times. You reading this article today will feel very different you reading this article a month from now, 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now. Because this is a very dense article. Each of these things I could talk about as a complete video, right? So what we'll do is we'll give you an overview of this article, okay? To give you a better understanding such that when you read this article for the first time alone, you already have some context. So currently, this is not a new idea, right? New countries being created. When was the last time a new country was created? I am not sure, but there's a few different ways it can be done, okay? For example, if you remember, this was if you remember what happened with Catalonia, right? Let's look at this as an example. Catalonia is now an autonomous, if I remember correctly, right? They're now an autonomous region in Spain, right? And of course, there was some disputes, and now they're a separate this thing. Usually, these disputes have been around language or ancestry, right? Some version of what has happened with Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, right? Typically, that leads to the current borders existing. However, so typically that's what drives new countries being created, right? There is some movement of power in an election where you rewrite or you form a new set of laws, and it's almost like a fork that happens. Revolution. Now, this maybe is closer to the Catalonia example. But if enough people decide that, hey, we should be a separate country, right? If that becomes the consensus view, then it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The revolution is another one. Of course, war is another, right? Which is typically in history, the way that you start a new country or the way you expand your empire was to acquire in some ways. Like today, you can acquire a startup if you want to grow your user base. And you can do this without violence. And violence is typically not useful because even if you fight the founder of the company you're trying to acquire, what will you get? All their assets are in the cloud, right? All their code, you can't steal it. It's not gold. It's not cash that you're stealing, right? In Yuval Noah Harari's, I think this was in Sapiens, he said that before, I think he took an example of some African tribe, and he said an African tribe had an economic incentive to attack a neighboring tribe because they could now take their gold. Right? They could take their gold. It was a physical struggle that you could do. However, today, if you look at China and the US, China makes more money cooperating with the US and trading with them, and of course with the rest of the world, than they would if they attacked the US, right? So financial incentives has led to a point of stability in some ways. Why? Because there's no gold to steal in Silicon Valley, right? Everything is silicon based. It's all in the cloud, right? Of course, there's corporate espionage. We're not going to get into that today. But yeah, that is super interesting. War was typically how most of this stuff happened before. Micronations is another, right? You can today set up a micronation. And there's a few examples of this, right? I'll show you some visual examples actually. to help you understand the size of these nations we're talking about. This thing that you see here, this barge, dude, this is a country. This entire barge is a country. It's a micronation. There's living quarters in this apparently from the last time that I was looking into this, and this is a helipad, and I think they're off the coast of UK if I'm not wrong. They're a couple kilometers, but this is, for example, a micronation. The thing with micronations, let's show a few more. There's a few of these. Very likely you've not really heard about too many. Give this a sec, it's just loading. Very likely you've not heard about most of these, right? There is one in Denmark, by the way. I've been to Christiania, and I'm probably going to go tomorrow again. Christiania technically is in Denmark. I am 4 kilometers from this micronation right now, something like that. 3 to 5 kilometers. Christiania is technically in Europe. They're in Denmark, but they are a sovereign micronation, right? So what happens in Christiania is they've got their own communities, they've got their own this thing, and technically Christiania is not a part of the EU, right? Despite the fact that they're in Denmark, and Denmark recognizes Christiania as a separate this thing, so they don't interfere with their workings too much. But there's a bunch of these as well. Now the biggest problem with this is also that for you to be a legit country, right? By legit I just mean, what does legit country mean? It just means that the rest of the world recognizes you, right? So for example, even though you might be from Christiania, if you wanted to travel to, let's say, India, you would need a Danish visa because a Christianian visa is probably not internationally recognized, right? So that's one of the problems with micronations. Let's quickly check in with some chats, right? How are we going? South Sudan is the latest country, yes. And Sudan, dude, Sudan's in Africa. They've had war, dude. Like, it's not been a smooth nation on this, okay? I mean, it's not been a smooth transition. So kingdoms of the past have led to this system that exists today, right? They merged to make countries, but this merge wasn't always that obvious. A lot of times it was political reasons. Sometimes it was because there was a consensus group that believed this should happen. Like if you look at the India partition, there were some people who did not want the partition, right? And it happened. So every case is very different. I'll just say that. So that is micronations, right? You can technically start a micronation today if you wanted to. It's just that the point is not just to start a nation, it's to create something that's better, right? It's not enough if I just create a flag and say, yo, this disputed patch of dirt is a new country. I could do this, right? I could buy some land in, let's see, Channapatna. Channapatna is, if I'm remembering correctly, between Bangalore and Mysore, right? So Channapatna is a place between major cities, right, near Bangalore and Mysore, and it's close enough that you could, for example, get your main stuff done. So you could, for example, buy a bunch of land in Channapatna. Right? Channapatna is very well known for their wooden toys, by the way. Some of you might know that. You could buy land there, and the thing is, you don't really have to jump to creating a country. So we'll talk about that in a bit, okay? Seasteading, right? Seasteading is basically, imagine this. Seasteading is an amazing concept, by the way. Imagine if you had a huge ass ship, right? Not a maybe a current biggest cruise, but imagine it could be way bigger. It could be a platform, for example, and it's almost like you created this artificial island, right? Let me show you a visual example of this. So imagine you created this platform which was in the Pacific Ocean or something like that, right? And it's like an artificial island or a group of islands. And you say, hey, this is now a separate this thing. I'm not sure if this is what Dubai was trying to do with the world islands. Have you all seen the world islands? That's what this reminds me of when I see it. But you could do this thing. Dude, fuck, I'm forgetting, dude. In Pokemon Ruby Sapphire, There was a place which was just like this. Can somebody tell me what it was? You would have to walk on those wooden things to reach somewhere. Anyway, so this is seasteading. Space, right? If we go to Mars, Elon has already said this, by the way. He said that if we go to Mars, you think we're gonna follow Earth laws, bro? You fucking kidding me, bro? He's already said that. He says when we go to Mars, we're gonna come up with a new version of the law, right? However, space as of now, it is kind of one directional, which is it's very difficult to come back from space, right? So the people who do this might not. It's a very certain type of people who will agree to go to space right now, even if within the next 5 years SpaceX sets something up. And then, of course, the most interesting one is a cloud country, right? We talked about this idea that why. Let me rephrase. We talked about this idea that we are reinventing old systems to work better with today's technology. Today's systems are built with the past in mind, which is in the past, it was a new problem, a system was created, that system became stable, and that's the present that we have. But the systems of today are not perfect, right? Because they don't account for the future. So, one thing to keep in mind is when we talk about countries, why are we thinking of physical countries? Right? Some countries will be physical, some of these new countries, but we could have cloud countries, right? That is the most interesting one, right? The cloud country, you would recruit online for a group of people interested in founding a new social network, new city, or eventually a new country, right? What ties people in a country together? It's usually some shared context. So if you live in Hubli, very likely that the people in Hubli, like your extended family is there, or you know, you have friends there who've grown up there, and the thing that ties them together is they're all Kannadigas, for example, right? And other shared contexts. When you're creating a cloud country, what you would do is you would recruit on some other parameters. You would recruit on either interested in these kind of topics or interested in this kind of vision of the future, right? And you would recruit these people almost as a community or maybe a company. Once you have that, you have an internal economy, right, which has remote work. Of course, there will need to be some in-person events as well, which is, of course, meeting people in real life is better than just meeting somebody online. But a lot of times online is better too, right? With Zoom, high bandwidth streaming, we've gotten to a point where it's not that bad. So the cloud countries of the future will probably combine two of these aspects, right? Combine in person as well as online. And eventually, right, not all will do this, but some will eventually crowdfund territory in the real world. But it might not need to be a continuous territory, a contiguous territory, which is, it doesn't all need to be this thing with like 500 or 6,000 acres. It doesn't all need to be in one place. You could create enclaves, which is, you could create a country that is decentralized. So a country that lives in one physical location, right? That's one idea. A country that lives in the cloud, that's another idea. A country that is decentralized all over the world. A country that lives in different parts of the world. And you can move between these enclaves because now you're a part of this cloud country, right? You can almost imagine it like Airbnb, right? Imagine it was an Airbnb, but the only users of Airbnb were the people who are a part of this country. And this is through a social network. We'll talk about how crypto comes into this, by the way. That's what makes it really, really interesting. You could have done this 5 to 10 years ago, but with crypto today, this is much more of a reality. We'll talk about that. So when you do that, you now sort of enter this very different kind of this thing. I want to talk about one real world example of this as well, right? That some of you might be thinking of. Rajneeshpuram. Rajneeshpuram was a community in Oregon. A lot of you know this. A lot of you might know one part of this, right? You know, it's like one problem is also that a lot of people immediately jump to the bad, right? There were a lot of things they did which weren't great, right? They poisoned the local community, bro. What the fuck? However, if you look at the concept, what were they trying to do? They were trying to reach self sovereignty. Self sovereignty, right? Let me open the Wikipedia page. Maybe we talk about a few things here. Rajneeshpuram had a big commune that they bought, right? The thing that tied them together was Osho, Rajneesh. They had their own fucking airport, right? They had their own airline, Air Rajneesh, and this was a community. Now, one thing I will say, and this is something Balaji mentioned in one of his recent interviews, maybe with Paras Chopra, if I'm not wrong, he talked about how people look at this and they're like, yo, it's so obviously a red flag. But the point is, dude, it's not illegal to set up your own city. It's not illegal to set up your own town. Think about the town that you live in today. At some point, it was land, it was unclaimed land, right? Or maybe it belonged to someone, but they weren't doing anything. Eventually, that land was bought up in packets. And when there's enough cultural or an economical movement in an area, a city forms around it. Right? That's what happens. One of the reasons a lot of cities in the past were located near riverbeds, right, or near the water, is because firstly, a good source of water, right? So that's where the city will start and eventually it will spread. But also because cities that were near ports, right? Port cities had a lot of trade, international trade. So if you look at Denmark today, Denmark, the two primary industries in Denmark are shipping and finance. Why? Because it's a port city, right? Shipping in Denmark has been a huge industry for the last 200 or 300 years. Finance, because once you ship all this, you need to maintain ledgers and everything of how things are going, right? So you need a good amount of back office work for it. Anyways, what I was saying is it's not illegal to set up a city or town, right? If you have blank land in Channapatna or wherever, like let's say Kasol or somewhere in India, you can set up a community. It initially can just be one house where it's you and a bunch of people who believe in something. And then, of course, you can't live in isolation. So you then have to work with the local community there. You can get them better economic opportunities. And as you do that, your community spreads. And maybe it never reaches a point where it becomes a city. But it's still a reflection of a city, right? It's just that in scale it might not be that big. But that's how cities are formed, right? It's just that today we assume cities have always existed. But no, cities were invented. We made cities because of cultural and economic activity. Let me show you a few examples of this, okay? One of which is Auroville. Auroville, bro, what a beautiful place. Beautiful place, okay? I will at some point make an entire video dedicated just to Auroville. Maybe it'll be a series. But Auroville is an experimental township, right? This is a huge monument. Imagine this. Imagine my surprise when I realized there was a huge golf ball looking structure in India, in Pondicherry, and I'd never heard about it. Dude, I heard about Auroville just a few years ago. By few years, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years. I had no clue Auroville existed. And this is beautiful, bro. I forgot what this is called. An international utopian community, right? This is beautiful, bro. There's a lot of, in fact, we were speaking, somebody was in the chat and they said, yo, I've lived in Auroville for a year. I think it was Meg, if I'm not wrong. But, dude, Auroville's been around for 400 years. It's just that today we don't think about it because they're not really trying to be a startup trying to acquire users. They're like, yo, we figured something out. We figured out an arrangement that works for us, that's good for the local economy, that allows people to come in. Shared goals are important, right? The intention with which you come into Auroville. Auroville is not a place where you go to party. I'll say that. Right? It's not Goa. Very interesting. There's a lot we can talk about if we talk about Auroville, but beautiful structure, bro. Really, really beautiful. Another example of this, I actually don't remember this. I might not be able to find this. I hope this is not the wrong one. But there are smaller communities all over India. The one I'm trying to find, I'm forgetting what the name is. It might be Saadho itself, actually. Now, Saadho is a small community in Dharamshala, and I guess now in London. It might be a different community that I'm thinking about. But can you call them a city? Maybe, maybe not. Right? Depends on size. But they're already a new community. Right? Community, city, country is just the same thing, but different scale. There's a few of these. Let me see chats. Maybe I'll get a few more ideas here. Sextus 39, Bro Colony, Faridabad. Bro, we could totally do this, We could totally do this. Okay, let's get back to the article. Okay. So what they are saying is similar to the concept of ethnic diasporas, right? Basically, what this means is imagine Indians as a community. Dude, there's Indians all over the world, right? All over the world. Does that mean India is a decentralized country? Sort of, right? Uh, but in the same way as there are Bitcoiners, right, all over the world. Now, the interesting thing to note here, this is where we'll enter into crypto territory. There's a lot of people out there who call themselves Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners is a stronger part of their identity than, let's say, them being Filipino or Indian or Pakistani or wherever else in the world. Why? Because the place where Bitcoin is most useful, countries with hyperinflation, let's say, places like Venezuela, where you can get like a trillion Zimbabwean dollars, that's hyperinflation, right? In countries like that, Bitcoin is a savior for them because they can now put their money in a safe store of value that actually increases in price. They get richer rather than them holding, let's say, Zimbabwean dollars that are worth 100 in the morning and they're worth 10 in the evening. Right? That's how bad the hyperinflation is. So people call themselves Bitcoiners. That's a strong part of their identity because Bitcoin has done more for them than their country has. Right? However, in some ways, a lot of people in the world feel like they're trapped in their country, which is instead of treating you like a citizen, as a customer, you're paying taxes. Countries treat you as you're locked in here, right? A lot of smaller countries that Bitcoin has been able to help. A lot of people feel that way, right? So, what exactly is a LARP? A LARP, it's used in a lot of funny ways on the internet. A LARP is basically live action role play, right? You can set up, if people strongly believe in something, they're live action role playing it out, and that becomes real. That becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. Now, the point is, what we're talking about is nothing new, right? Rajneesh, they attempted this back in the day in 1981 to 88, right? They couldn't last. Obviously, bros. I mean, it's not easy setting up a country. But Auroville, for example, great example of something that has really, really lasted, right? When we look at Rajneeshpuram, the reason a lot of people are like, bro, that's such a, XYZ, bro. It's because they look at it and they're like, it failed. But, it's not just Auroville. There's hundreds, hundreds of examples of places like Auroville that have managed to make it work, that have managed to reach self sovereignty in a very peaceful, in a very integral way. But we never hear about them, right? So, one important cognitive bias to remember, is that you, if you don't see something in the world, don't assume it doesn't exist, right? That's a very common cognitive bias, which is if we don't see something in our everyday reality, we assume it doesn't exist. This is one example. If you've never heard of Auroville, you'll be like, dude, what the fuck is Balaji trying to do? Right? What is he trying to do? This seems like a revolutionary idea. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to connect this old idea that you can be self-sovereign, and he's trying to connect it to today's, not today's, but his version of the future, which involves crypto. And we'll talk about all of that now. Okay, let's jump back into the article. Minimum necessary innovation. I'm going to skip over some of this. Okay, I think roughly we have talked about this a bit, but then to me, this is not the main point of the article. This is supporting evidence, right? You can always tell when there's a lot of links, right? So please do check these out if you want to build more of your conviction around this. But we're going to jump to the meaty part of this, right? Um, the point he's trying to make here, though, is what does it take to really become real, right? How do you move from a community or a city to a country? That's a big leap, right? What Balaji is saying, my interpretation of it right now at least, is that number one, you need enough people who want it to happen, right? Um, and you need something that chains them together, that ties them together, right? Usually that is the economy, right? So with Bitcoin, one thing you have to realize, okay, let's talk about jobs for a second, right? And I think we're coming toward the end of this article, so I'll add a few more things that you might want to know about this. Today, if you look at our social networks and we assume them to be countries, dude, Facebook is a huge, huge country. 3 billion users probably makes Facebook the biggest country in the world. Twitter has 300 million, right? This is all. Twitter is almost the size of the United States. United States has maybe 330 million, if I'm not wrong, right? There are influencers who have more than a million, right? Imagine that. It was not possible back in the day. So you already have the people. You have some sense of shared consciousness. But the one thing that brings it together, the reason Balaji's main this thing is crypto, right? The reason, oh, I really, Balaji, if you're watching this, I really want this 100 BTC. I am posting a review of this technically. So let me propose some extensions, right, that can help with this. One thing we have to understand is all this is fun, but eventually you might get pulled into jobs, right? Today, if you have a community, if you have a community online, you're going to stay in that community usually for the entertainment aspect of it. You know, it's fun, you're making new friends, you're watching live streams. But if a new community comes that's more fun, you're probably going to switch to that, right? A lot of you have examples for this, right? A lot of you started in Avalon's community. You're now more active on Twitter than on Avalon. Maybe you're more active in the Bro Discord than you were on Avalon, right? That happens. That's totally natural. The thing that needs to tie people down at some level needs to be the economy, which is if there was a community out there that actually paid you money. Today it sounds crazy when we think about that. Why would a community pay me money? Think about this. The information that you are giving Facebook clearly is valuable information. But without Facebook, that information wouldn't be valuable, right? It's only that Facebook exists, and all due respect to Facebook, they figured out a way to monetize information, and run the world's biggest or one of the biggest ad engines. Facebook today takes that information. Not just Facebook, most companies today don't pay you for being users, and even if they do, it's like cashback and shit. That's not what I'm talking about. What if the money that Facebook is making or any company is making from your data, what if you could own that data and you could make money from it? Today, that is possible. Today, that is possible. Okay. Previously, it was not possible. Previously, The point is, we to reach this point today, Facebook needed to exist. Those companies have brought us to this point today, but they might not be the ones that take us forward. So let me give you an example now. Why do most of us assume that after school you're going to go to college, after college you're going to get a job, this job is going to pay you this, if you have time remaining you will travel, you will do stuff with your friends, you will hang out, you might meet a partner, you might get married, you might live together, you might have a child together, at some point you will retire, and that's it, right? Why is that the leading narrative? Because it's true for most people, right? That's the reality of the world, whether we like it or not. However, that's the past. One of the reasons your parents are going to say, hey, we want you to get a job. What are you doing online? Like, yo, it's your final sem. Get a fucking job, right? The reason you might be feeling that pressure, sitting for placements, whatever it might be, is because in the past, that's how things were. I'll give you my example, bro. My granddad on my mom's side. What a guy, bro. What a guy, right? But his career, if I talk about it, right, I'll talk about more about him later. But his career specifically, he worked for the Bokaro steel plant, right? Anybody here from Bokaro? Tell me something. Bokaro steel plant. He worked there. That was his first job. He worked there and he retired at the age of 60 or 65, and that was his career. And of course, after that, he did a lot of stuff, right? That's not the point. Point is, that was the default life path for most Indians. But that was the past. We need a solid vision of the future. If we really want to change things, we can't randomly do shit. We need to say that, hey, this is something that will happen. And if enough people believe it, we will reach that point where it does happen, right? But what is the vision of the future? Let me give you a very simple example for that. Today, if you get a job, what you're doing is you are selling your time to an employer, right? What that employer is saying is, hey, I will pay you per month for your time, right? It's almost like a subscription service where you are the product, they're paying for your time. You will get this as a salary. We will do it continuously. We'll do it for a few months, right? They have the probation period, okay? After 3 months, this will change. But this is a system. And then after a year, you get a appraisal. Just to be 100% clear, I'm not saying this is wrong, right? I'm not saying jobs suck. Jobs are great. I've done jobs before, right? And I've learned so much from them. I've gotten a chance to work with people I would have never before. But jobs might not look the same tomorrow. Already we're seeing a lot of, I look at Gen Z for inspiration. I look at, of course, millennials too. Dude, very few of us want to work a job. To be very, very real. And dude, why should we want to work a job? Why should we want to work a job we don't like? On Instagram, every single day you see influencers. They're making money off sponsored posts. They seem to be having fun. They seem to be controlling their own life. You look at that and you're like, dude, my only option is to get a sales role, to get a BD role, right? To become an engineer at this, at TCS, Infosys. It's not bad, right? It's needed. It's a part of the economy. That means some people will have to do that. However, we have new narratives now. So one thing I want you all to note, right? And this is my further reading that I'll give you for this session, is Balaji has a new book coming out as well. It's going to be called The Network State. However, a lot of these ideas were first talked about, and this is a very influential book, what I'm about to recommend. This is something that Balaji has recommended in one of his very early episodes. I first came across that a year or two ago. And this book is called The Sovereign Individual. The Sovereign Individual. What a book, bro. Okay. So let me quickly tell you what it is before I show you. The Sovereign Individual, if you read this book, you would think it was written a few months ago because Sovereign Israel talks about cryptocurrencies. They talk about the concept of cryptocurrencies. Sovereign individuals talks about the fact that we're moving towards freelance. Full-time jobs are going to go down. Sovereign individual talks about the gig economy, about how there are going to be these companies that employ a ton of people in a systemic way, in a systematized way, right? So instead of calling a taxi, you can call an Uber, and it's a standard, predictable process, and quality is maintained, right? Uber becomes an API for transport, an API in the real world. You can read, write cars, you can call them, right? You can move in the real world. Sovereign Individual talks about all of that. But Sovereign Individual was written in 1999, published in 1997, right? How the fuck were they able to talk about this? How the fuck did they predict this? The point is, this is all the stuff we're talking about is nothing new. It's just that we haven't discovered it for ourselves. Our generation, we haven't discovered this. In 1997, dude, fucking the internet in 1997, you could hardly do anything on the internet. There were no videos, there was email, it was mostly text. There was no there was no multimedia, there was no phones. In 1997, these folks are talking about the fact that we're transitioning to the information age, right? From the industrial age, we're transitioning to the information age. And they basically lay out a beautiful thesis of what the world is going to look like, right? And it's really, really true. It's crazy. Now, the point is also that it's a very difficult read. I will add that, right? It's quite a difficult read, mostly because, let me make it a little simpler to read, mostly because it's a very dense book, right? Each page, each page in this book could be an entire fucking book, okay? I'll be very honest, I haven't read the whole book myself, right? But basically what it says is, yo, our systems cannot be based in the industrial age anymore. The variables have changed now. It's the information revolution. And how we got here is we were talking about jobs, right? We were talking about how today the default is to get a job. The future we're moving towards is some version of the gig economy, right? However, it's not stuff like driving for Uber, making deliveries for Postmates, Swiggy, whatever. Imagine, instead of having one employer that pays for 30 days at a time, your time, keep this in mind, the most important resource, the most scarce, non-hackable, limited resource, the only one, is time. You can never get back time. An employer pays you for this time. However, imagine instead of having one job and one employer, you could have two jobs and two employers. That's not so hard to imagine, is it? A lot of people are already doing that. A lot of designers, it's very common to freelance. Not just designers, most creators, they have a side hustle. They're doing their job with a side hustle. Right? It might be learning a new skill, it might be a new project. So already we're sort of decentralized. Instead of one source of income, you can get to a point where you have two sources of income. What if we push this even further? What if you had three jobs from three different people? And of course, you know what I'm getting towards. I'm getting towards n jobs with n number of people. Today, there's a limiting factor. You cannot do, for example, 3,000 jobs for whatever number of people. 3,000 people, or you can't do 3,000 jobs for 1,000 people in a month, right? Why? Because the limiting factor is time. However, the startups of today, the reason they're worth so much is because they figured out how to scale, right? The marginal cost of scaling is low. I'll give you a very simple example. If I wanted to make one t-shirt versus 100 t-shirts, it's a linear scale, right? I have to get more factories, more workers, do all of this stuff. But if I make one app, going from 10 to 100 users, you might not even have to change your servers. It just stays the same. to 1,000 users. You might have to change servers and add more capacity when you reach 100,000 users. But to do that, you needed to start a company, right? Or you needed to start a media thing. You need to start a podcast or a YouTube channel. Today, I can talk to, how many people do we have on stream? We have 40, 50 people. I can talk to all of you individually, or I can do this. And over the next 6 months, this video is going to get hundreds of thousands of views. I am scaling. The sovereign individual, the thesis that Balaji, sovereign individual, the book is talking about is you're going to wake up. You're going to look at your phone. There's going to be a bunch of tasks for you, right? These are going to be tasks. Who gives these tasks? It's going to be communities that you own a part of. Something we didn't talk about today was the concept of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. We will figure out taxes. We will figure out income tax, VAT. We'll find out better taxation mechanisms, right? That's DAOs. Maybe that's a different one. But the way you will scale as a freelancer, right, is you will own equity. This is where we connect it to NFTs. Every NFT, for example, right? Let's take an example. Imagine NFT to be a side project, right? Maybe a side project could be SaaS, it could be a YouTube, it could be a micro SaaS. Imagine NFTs as a side project. When you own an NFT, you own ownership, not just of that NFT, but in some ways of a community. You're a part of that community, right? You're part of that Discord or whatever. Now, the more you promote their Discord and get more people to buy that NFT or whatever, the price increases. Murat Park, the fact that we had a huge auction, today was the last day, is because, dude, people want to buy, right? They want to be a part of this community. Because to them, these cubes, these digital cubes have way more meaning than something that they could hang on their wall. Because art today is not canvas. It's these social experiments that are on the internet. Right? It's these massive games. So the vision is that you wake up, you're going to see this task which says, hey, $1,000 for a 10 minutes of your time, right? The point is today, it's not freelancing. It becomes something totally different at that point. Because today, for me to find 2 freelancers versus 20 freelancers, it takes 10x the amount of time for me to find 20. And that's why I will never look for 20, because I can never handle them. But you reach a point where making companies becomes just as easy. And the game changer here, right? Thank you for the reminder, by the way, Chaitanya. The game changer here is that we avoid monopolies, right? We can avoid motherfucking supervillains. We can avoid supervillains entirely. And I'm not saying Zuck is a supervillain, okay? Let's not jump to conclusions. But we can avoid these monopolies. Dude, the point is the rich are getting richer, right? On a very real note, Timothy Leary, back in the 60s, had this quote where he said, turn on, tune in, drop out. He said, as long as you're playing the games of these men who've set, not men, whatever, people who've set these games up, you cannot win playing somebody else's game, right? But despite that, the reason these the task app owner, the person who builds this, is not going to be the next Zuck or might be as wealthy as the next Zuck. But we've reached a point where users become equity holders. Users become equity holders. What that means is companies in the future will pay you to be a user because they realize that, it's not just about data. It's the fact that we're building our own economy. So we need to pay our users. We're already seeing that with coins, for example, right? The fact is, if you own Ethereum or Bitcoin, you basically own stocks. This is equivalent, okay, not equal. You basically own stocks of this company that is increasing in market cap every year, that has new features that are being added, is increasing in adoption. Previously, you needed to be an employee to be able to own a company stock, or you need to buy it on a stock exchange. And even then, not everybody could buy it, right? You need to be an accredited investor, or if you want to invest in mutual funds, you need to be, I think, at least 18. There's a minimum 5,000 or something limit that you need to do. With Bitcoin and Ethereum, we've reinvented that. You can now buy fractional Bitcoin, fractional Ethereum. Today, it represents an asset. Right? That asset is Bitcoin and Ethereum. However, it also represents a network. You owning Ethereum is you saying that you believe in the Ethereum network. And then you'll actually be able to do that with staking. Currently, Ethereum is proof of work. It's switching to proof of stake. That's not what this video is about. Right? If you don't understand that, totally chill. But you'll be able to do that. So the companies of the future will give their users money. I had this tweet that I made. I talked about that in a previous stream, which is everybody's making money from IPL except for you, except for me, right? Unless we bet, unless we're a team owner, unless we're a cricketer, unless we're a sponsor. However, with NFTs, you could now have fractional ownership in a sports team, in the performance tied to a particular event. You could buy a memento like the six sixes, like the game winning six of the match. You could buy that as a token. And in the future, the fact that you participated is the reason you got it. And in the future, you can resell this to somebody who values it more. That is what digital assets will look like. Okay. Imagine today, if you could buy, imagine if today you owned a piece of Sholay, bro. Not Chole, okay? Sholay, the movie. Sholay, think of the connection I want you to draw as a startup versus a media thing, okay? Sholay was a huge thing. Even today, Sholay carries a special place in a lot of people's hearts. However, who owns Sholay? Who makes money and royalties from Sholay? It's only the company that owns it and a few group of companies that own it. Right? And royalties are paid out. In the future, you will be able to own a piece of media, own a piece of a project, own a piece of a coin, own, with BitCloud, you can own influence. If you think an influencer is going to grow, you can own a piece of that. Changes the game. Changes the game. You could have always sold your day one Sholay ticket, right? But who the fuck is going to verify it? It was not possible. When it is on the blockchain, you can see when it was minted, who bought it, who sold it, the entire price history, and that creates a market. When a market is created, more people want to participate in it, right? So, folks, very engaging discussion, right? As you can see, this is something that I'm super, super kind of into. And the point is, Akshay, we're not actually doing this from scratch. We're stitching together our existing systems. The point is, the people who know how to run communities today have a very valuable skill. Just one example, right? People who are developers, people who are designers, people who are video editors, they have these skills already. However, these skills will now transfer into the metaverse. The metaverse, the way I want you to imagine it is, metaverse is basically Earth has countries in the same way that the metaverse has these network states. So the metaverse is not just one, you know, Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's not just that. It's not just the Avalon metaverse or the Bro metaverse or whoever else is saying, yo, we have a metaverse, right? Decentralized or crypto voxels. The same way that the Earth has countries, continents, cities, the metaverse has network states. As opportunities on the metaverse increase, there's going to be a migration. Right? Why do people move countries? It's because opportunities are better. We're already spending most of our time online in these metaverses. A metaverse doesn't have to be VR, right? It can just be a place that you go online. These metaverses, the fact that they're the new countries, the network states, are now incentivized to keep you here because they have their own version of the economy, they have their own version of taxes, right? They are treating you as a customer. They're like, yo, if you're paying us taxes, you're helping our economy, you are a customer. Why should we should incentivize you as much as possible. And here's where things get crazy. We are already in a metaverse. It's just that we don't call it that yet. And the second thing, countries, real countries today are becoming more crypto friendly. They are saying your Your wallet, right? Your wallet that holds all your ETH, your Bitcoin, your ownership in these communities, your NFTs. There will be countries who recognize that as a passport. They will say that, hey, of course we want Bitcoiners, Ethereans, or whoever else to come to our country. We'll make it super favorable for you, right? So what happens is countries then have to play the game of startups, which is they have to acquire users. Countries today have a monopoly. Countries have a monopoly. But when countries start competing for talent, what happens is the whole system changes. Suddenly you have Estonia, you have Singapore saying, hey, we are a crypto friendly state. If you have a DAO, right? A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. I keep saying this. If you have a DAO, Singapore could just say, hey, we recognize DAOs. Your DAO is your passport, right? Move it here. And since a DAO is a common company format, in the same way that a JPEG is a pictures format, they could just recognize your DAO. And then immigration, like moving from Singapore to Estonia, let's say, wouldn't require any paperwork because they're like, it's a DAO. We recognize DAOs. So now you just move there, right? The point is, dude, passports today are our global identity. Passports are global identity. These new nations, these micronations or network states, they don't have to reach a point where they make a new, where they get recognized by the UN and they're like, can we issue passports? They just be like, yo, we'll just make a better passport, right? Passport as a product. We'll just make a way better passport that doesn't rely on your place of birth. It relies on what assets you own in the metaverse, and that's going to be game changing. So thank you all. Thank you all for coming here, right? No bail break today. We went all in, right? This Wednesday stream was super packed. I love what's happening, bro. I love what's happening. I will be sharing some invites to the Bruh Discord right after this on Twitter. So, folks who are not a part of it, Bruh is a Discord today. But overall, big picture, Bruh is a prototype. It's a prototype of the future. It's a prototype of how things could be very different, but it needs to be designed. The point is, you and I, as programmers, designers, creators, we could make projects. Now we can design the economy. We can design how we live. We can design our lifestyle. We can design our own cities, communities, countries. So, with that, I'll talk to you later. I will talk to you in a separate video. We're doing daily streams. This is number 14. Please hit a comment, in hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a comment. If you found this interesting, please share it with a friend. If not the video, share the article. Right? Let's get Balaji some new newsletter signups today. So that's me signing off. Thank you, and I will see you somewhere else on the metaverse.